Now, I've always lived the life of the manic depressive, living in its wild and free state until I was recently captured by doctors. And this has led me to follow some unusual paths in life. So this is a story about 3 lives I had in Africa. I'd gone to Africa for 6 months, and I was supposed to be travelling with 3 friends that I knew. They'd gone a week before me, and I was living in that state of mind where the moment was everything and all else forgotten. So I never met the people. I'd met a couple of randoms, and I'd gone to visit the Kakamega forest, a day's travel from Nairobi. And it's the nearest area of wild, jungly kind of place that's close to Nairobi, and it's set in an area of darkish rural agricultural Africa. And me and these other 2, we'd gone into the nearest shop village to get some cigarettes, and we'd met, as you do in Africa at that time, the local con man basically. And we went with him to visit his hut in his family little farm. I stayed for 6 weeks, and I lived the life of the ordinary, normal people in agricultural, darkest Kenya. So I stayed with this guy and shared his life. I was fascinated with the wildlife and the people and the life. Now, as well as the things you would expect to happen, of course, being the character that I am, after dark in rural Africa where there's no lights, people don't really go out at night. It's not really safe, but of course characters do, and there's a little gathering for moonshine and whatnot. So I'm a part of this kind of life. My friend, of course, being slightly mad himself, an incident occurred in the night. So a plan had been hatched, basically to rob me, by my friend faking his own robbery. And this led to an event of the nature of machetes brandished in the night style. Even when people mean you harm, it's very difficult for people to initiate violence, particularly if they think the other person might have them back. The local characters were aware of my ability to look after myself. But as is often the case with incidents I've found in life, there's always a last moment before trouble in which to take some action. And that moment of crux is where Nick is at his best. Whether by skill or by bluff, I escaped the situation. Clearly the time had come to move on, and it was time for another life to naturally end. Now, while I was in the forest, I'd met this girl. She was cycling across Africa on her own. I'd never thought of such a thing before. What an amazing idea. So I set off to the nearest town and buy a bicycle, £50, a Hovis bike, a big cast iron thing, lever brakes, no gears, a little ding-a-ding bell, lots of framework and whatnot, the most unsuitable thing you could possibly find. Very rugged and never had any punctures, but in every other way absolutely useless. Grabbing a few items from the local market, I piled my excess equipment on board and set off. Why not? Up towards Ethiopia, not good political situation, back down through the back countries, Tanzania, Malawi and into Zimbabwe. Complete act of lunacy. I pushed it and carried it as much as I rode it. Useless uphill, useless downhill. I will always remember the descent of the Great African Rift. It's a very long way down and a very steep road. As soon as I came onto the slope, the brakes completely failed on me, and for 20 minutes I careered, rattling and swearing out of control down the endless way. No possibility of stopping or having any control. Absolutely terrified, desperately trying to look for somewhere to crash under control. No, never again. Onward my steed and I pressed relentlessly through the blazing heat, the dust and the flies, and a lot of the time I cycled with a sheet completely covered I could easily see through, my every thought filled by the mission. I pressed relentlessly on. Nothing can stop me. I'm a nutter. It's a battle against me and the roads. Nice roads, not so nice roads. Roads made of holes. Corrugated roads. Roads swept, buried beneath the sands for miles upon miles. At my feeble pace, I'm thoroughly exposed to the human landscape that I pass, a common target of bored children with stones and anybody that would just like to walk briskly along beside me and entertain me has no problem. The side is uphill slope and I slow to a slow jogging speed, and most of the time only really making a brisk walking pace. But of course I meet countless interesting and helpful people, and the kindness of the local people helped me through my venture. So there was one time I was somewhere in northeast Kenya, more towards Somali way, and there's a small town where I need to get some money from the bank, and there's a lot of Somali refugees there. So engaging a local guide, I go to visit the local Somali market, and I want to buy a knife, like a utility knife about so big. They make them in open fires and in the old style. So I find some guys around their fire inside their big tenty shelter. But they've either got huge, great big things or tiny little things, but not the one I want. A messenger goes, some more guys come to show me what they've got, and some more people come to show me what they've got, and some more people. Eventually I end up with 25 people, a great sea of knives in my face. I look at my guide looks at me. We burst out in laughing at the sea of knives waved in my face. I got the one I wanted in the end, but I slept that night behind a locked door with an armed guard at my door. So I'd made it, me and my trusty steed, made it as far as Zimbabwe, and a short spell with giardia, an amoebic illness, had broken the spell of cycling. As is often the case, the trial and the exercise had lifted my mood. Saying farewell to my trusty steed, I headed on my first. So there, with one life over, time still for a more sociable one. Time for an interlude with the American. Now, when you live an unsettled life, it's always a good thing to meet interesting people and learn from them in life. So the American is a giant of a man, 6'8", built like a mountain, one of the biggest people I've ever met, frankly. And how I'd met him in a hostel in Nairobi. He was convalescing from a nearby hospital. He'd been beaten to a pulp by 6 guys with iron bars. And he made his living transporting diamonds, illegal diamonds, through customs, carrying a briefcase handcuffed to himself, a walking target, essentially. So one day he'd been ambushed and given a good old pasting. A difficult person to get to know, but he'd been reading the works of St. Augustine, and I borrowed from him, and we sat and talked with that for a while and got to know each other. So for a week in Nairobi, I had the most interesting tour and introduction to the seamier side of the business of crime in Africa, as it was at that time. I did get to do the more normal fun and sights and scenes that you normally would, and had a more usual travelling time as I worked my way back up towards Nairobi to get my flight back. No doubt to arrive at home with 50p in my pocket, looking for a sofa to occupy temporarily. And that's the story of the 3 lives I lived in Africa.